they talk about the subject, but my life would have been very different if I hadn't met Arthur Agee. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life to get to know him.
Yeah.
We have been friends way longer than I've been married.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
we have gone through life together for the last 35 years.
35 years.
And we've had our ups and downs and
Yep.
our good times and dealing with a lot of the issues that you see talked about in the film. But we're here together, and,
Yep.
and that's a testament to Arthur. And anyways, love you, my man.
Yeah, I love you too, Pete. Uncle Pete. I call him Uncle Peter.
Yeah.
So,
And think, he had to know me when my hair was like that.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to say, from a standpoint of ethical of our film, I want to mention that our film was a different type of film. And the other films you see that's included in Subject, I'm glad that Peter, Steve, and Fred, and Gordon Quinn had ethics and morals of filming our families, William Gates' families too. Like me and Peter was talking the other night, you know, they didn't really know what they were doing at the time. We didn't know.
Understatement.
We didn't know what to expect or anything. It started off as a 30-minute after-school special on PBS of how basketball is played in the inner city.
Basically, we were going to pick one court
Yep.
in the inner city because at that time, before AAU basketball, street ball was where it was at. And the one thing that Steve, Fred, and I bonded on was the way that we mostly met people of color, to be honest,
Yeah.
was playing basketball on the street. And so we wanted to pick it was a very simple film. It was going to be very simple,
Yeah.
which was basically just one court and film the people on the court, get to know them a little bit, spend a month there in the summer.
Yep.
And that was about it. Until we met Big Earl Smith,
Big Earl Smith.
who's the guy who's in the picture, who was a insurance person, but also
Yeah.
a scout,
Yeah.
basically for,
Several area high schools.
Yeah,
St.
for-
Joseph, Collins, St. Mel.
yeah, so a bunch of actually mostly Catholic schools. And we met him, and on the first day of going around Chicago to different courts, we went to this court, and Arthur's right, we got out of the car, in Garfield Park, we
Yep.
set up a tripod, we started shooting, and Earl saw Arthur go up and down a court 2 times. And he said to us, that kid's good. I mean, he's got something, which of course blew our mind, because he literally saw him go up and down 2 times.
Yeah.
We then, I want to give you a little background. We then actually pulled Arthur aside. He must have thought we were from another planet.
Yeah. I was just start throwing out questions like, why y'all here? What you doing here? What are y'all doing with these cameras?
Yeah, and we didn't really know. And basically, Earl said, I want to take the kid out to St. Joseph's to give him a try. St. Joseph's High School at that time, where the film was made, was like a storied program
Yeah.
with a storied coach.
Yeah.
He was like the Bobby Knight of basketball of Chicago.
Yep.
Which is why it's good Arthur left St. Joseph. But it was one of these things. So now one thing the film does get wrong, which is we actually went the next day and
Yeah.
talked to his mom.
Yes, you
And
got
said that
permission.
we were going to come back filming. Then the next day we came back filming, and yes, we did knock on the door and we had the cameras rolling.
Yeah.
But we didn't do it the first
We
day.
didn't do it the first day.
That would have been cruel.
Yeah.
And then basically the journey began with Arthur and going out to St. Joe's, meeting William Gates. It seems like there was all this planning, but it really wasn't as heavily researched or whatever you think.
Yeah, well, I mean, all Earl Smith was said was, I'm going to take you out to St. Joe's High School. It's a basketball camp out there, and Isaiah Thomas is going to be there. He had me hooked when he said that. So I was like, I don't care about no cameras or nothing. So I'm sitting in the front of Earl's car as we driving out there on the expressway. Peter's in the back with the camera, and I just got a smile on my face so big, smiling ear to ear, and they like, I think you asked the question, like, what if Isaiah's there today? And I'm like, man, like, if he there, like, man, that just gonna make my day. Like, I'm gonna feel like on top of the world. And when I got to meet him and see him up close, and it was just a confidence thing kicked inside of me when I was out there on the court doing the little drills, what they were putting us through and everything. And I was just like, man, like I can play out here. Like I like this place. Like I can do this. And that's where they met William Gates.
And also that was seeing Arthur out in that environment, which was, we should say, an all-white suburban environment.
Yep. Westchester, Illinois.
So where the film changed and where the ethics began for us was when the coach brought Arthur's family into his office and said, if your kid, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, if your kid does what I tell him, he's going to get a 4-year scholarship somewhere and go to college.
Yep.
And that was sort of like a bing for us, like for a white person in power to tell an inner city family that if you do this, this is going to happen. That was where suddenly we went from a 30-minute film that was going to be shot in a month, where we decided we wanted to go on this journey for as long as we could with folks.
I can just imagine inside their heads, him, Steve, and Fred, when they said that, it was like, oh, like things just pinging off like inside their heads, like, oh man, I mean, it wasn't even a working title of Hoop Dreams' name hadn't even been put on it, but that's where the story began when they heard Gene Pingatore tell us that. And from the next 1987, 1988, 1989, I mean, they lived with us. Like, I was filming probably 3 times a week. They was at my house so much they had left cameras, lighting equipment already, taped on our walls in the house and everything. So when they come over, they wouldn't have to bring all that equipment if they shooting in the house. So some of that stuff was left there. Like, it was just crazy.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think, for us, when you're looking at a film like we just watched and you start thinking about the ethical stuff, documentary has taken such a different position in this era. We were in a different era, which was, we were in the 80s, and one of the, in the up to the mid-90s, I would say, with our film really having insane popularity. Yeah. And one of the things that was ethically very difficult for us was it was uncharted land, not only for us, but for our industry. So the real reason that, in my mind, that we're in this film, because if you notice, Hoop Dreams seems to be a fairly different film than the other ones there, is because we're equal partners. I wouldn't want to be our accountants.
Right, right.
But I'm just saying we are equal partners and have been equal partners since the film went to Sundance.
Yep.
And you can imagine, think about this on an ethical level. We're at the Sundance Film Festival, and one thing that is also different was we were making a film about inner city families, and also because you could walk into any city neighborhood, and Arthur, tell me if I'm being wrong or appropriating, but I could ask you how to become a professional basketball player, and you could just roll it off. I got to do this, I got to do that, but if I asked you how to be a lawyer, it might be a little harder. And we were fascinated by that. Like, why this, that in this neighborhood, like, why wasn't that the role model that people were seeing?
Right.
And what that meant, what that dream meant.
And I would have been like, well, one of these drug dealers got arrested yesterday, so I know they got a lawyer. So let me go ask them. That would have been my question on that.
And it was an interesting era too, because they talk about violence in Chicago now. Mm-hmm. It was as violent then as it was now. It was what people called the crack 80s. Mm-hmm. And it was a very different time. But what was also really different about it, on many ethical levels, was that one, Arthur had a lot more power, even though he was young. Mm-hmm. And his parents, because there was no technology, they could always disappear. Yep. So in other words, if I wanted to see Arthur, I had to go find Arthur. Yeah. There was no texting, there was no cell phones. Only thing was a landline.
It was a landline, and hopefully we paid the bill that it was on.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a really different way of making films. Also, documentaries, maybe 3 or 4 documentaries a year were theatrically released at that time. Yeah. And Sundance was the USA Film Festival when we started filming. Mm-hmm. It had just begun. It was a different era, and we wouldn't have, right now, what like Tom Powers said in the film, we are in a corporate documentary world, unfortunately, and we wouldn't even be able to make Hoop Dreams because it was longitudinal, and those were the films that I love, which was the idea of getting to know Arthur, spend time with Arthur, William, the families, and sort of be in their world. Mm-hmm. As an outsider, not as an insider, but as an outsider. Yep. And then being an insider, maybe more in the St. Joe's world, yep. That kind of thing. It was a really different time to make films. And just to give you an idea, they talk about outreach, and then I'm going to shut up and we could ask questions and talk to Arthur. But with outreach, so if you think about all the stuff with sports now, with NILs, players getting paid, I think one of the players on the Wake team, his last name was Appleby, and he got a deal with Applebee's restaurants. So when our film was ready to be released, when our film was ready to be released, the NCAA came out and said they were going to strip Arthur and William of their scholarships. Arthur and William couldn't go to Sundance. Yep. They weren't allowed to talk about the film. They weren't allowed to promote the film. It wasn't until Alex Wolff, who was a writer for Sports Illustrated, threatened the NCAA with a cover story that they were going to do this. Because, the crazy thing about Hoop Dreams is that Arthur and William both made it through college. And I mean, it's if you would pick 2 basketball players randomly, and the idea that both of them would have scholarships and get through college and all of that, that would have been unique. But anyways, that was our fight, actually, was to get them seen after the film was made. They could be seen in the film, but we couldn't get them on TV. We weren't allowed to have them on the Today Show, the kinds of things that you would do
to promote the film.
To promote a film, and especially most documentaries didn't get promotion at all, and this was the first time in a long time where they really wanted to see your families on TV, and it was really frustrating not to do it. The first time that Arthur was able to see the movie in person was at Avery Fisher Hall at the New York Film Festival. But the idea that we couldn't bring any of them to Sundance, for better or for worse. Yeah, but still, I'm just saying, and at Sundance, just so you understand where the world was at with documentary, which is sort of like the staircase. No one wanted to buy the film. The only people who wanted, basically what happened was everybody just wanted to remake it. They wanted to remake the film because in their minds, in Hollywood's mind, who wants to see, think about it in this era of sports with ESPN and everything, who would want to see a film that's 2 hours and 57 minutes about 2 black kids playing basketball?
That don't make it to the NBA.
Yeah. So it was a very different, I just want you to know sort of the landscape that we were in we were fighting maybe some of the different battles
Yeah.
than some of those filmmakers were fighting and had. But I will say, coming back from Sundance, my proudest moment of the film, and Arthur was not there for this because you weren't allowed to be.
Yep.
We came back and there were, in the papers and the trades, there were things saying that we had made deals for $3 to $5 million on sales of the film, all this stuff. And all the families who were able to, we all met at in the basement of Cartempuin Films. And Curtis, who unfortunately was murdered, who was William's brother, stood up and he said, there are like 50 people just packed in, and he goes, I love you guys. I think you guys have our best interests. What is going on? I have our best interests going on, but you know, I have never not been fucked over by a white person. and coming out of that conversation and having the relationship from there to where we are still today.
Still today.
Is the thing probably I'm proudest about with the film.
Yeah. You know, my mom and dad, you know, they were there, you know, at the meeting negotiating on our behalf, and I was at Arkansas State. So, you know, I was still, you know, just living my college life. But after Alex Wolff threatened the NC2A, the next week, Tom Brokaw is flying down to Arkansas State to interview me for a segment on Dateline. And I'm like, you know, man, for months I couldn't talk about the film and all this, and like now all of a sudden, so I started thinking like that the school was trying to capitalize off the whole, you know, famous of the movie, the whole notoriety of it. So I was like, okay, I got to try to use this to the best of my ability to market myself to try to get to the NBA after this. So, you know, after everything, you know, we was able to come home, talk to my mom and dad and them. They said they went to the meeting and everything. So they was like, well, they assured us that everything that Peter, Steve, and Fred get, that the boys would get. And then the families would get some with them, you know, by themselves and separate. So as long as I heard that, I was cool. Like I was fine. And
but even on another ethical level, in terms of trust, and this is maybe what 6 or 7 years of being with people do,
Yeah.
where you build trust. If we got paid, they had to trust us to hold the money for them.
Yep.
Because we couldn't give any money to your parents.
Yep.
We couldn't give money to anybody who was in the film because that would be an MCA violation. We couldn't put a money in a blind trust
Yep.
for you guys. So they had to wait till they were literally done
with college,
with
out
college
of school period.
before that we could do anything, and they had to trust us that it was there and for them. And it was, again, and the reason, that's one reason we're in the film. The other reason is because the documentary community vilified us in a huge way, because we actually cut people in who were in the film. And that was not well thought upon in the documentary community. And it's still an issue today about should participants, if the film is successful, have a piece of the film or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's more not paying people to be in the film.
Right.
It's if the film is successful.
Yeah.
Should they have?
And speaking to that point, you know, I think they did everything right to, because once the film made money, a lot of people was thinking like, oh man, I was in that, I was in this scene. But what I love what they did was, there's right now, every year since 1994, there's been a scholarship at Marshall High School that has been given out, and it's called the Hoop Dream Scholarship. I believe it's a $500 scholarship that they give at graduation. and it was a scholarship at St. Joe's High School that was given to an inner city kid that was traveling just like me and William was. And St. Joe's is no longer open now. It's been closed down and everything. But I thought that was, along great ethical lines of thinking of the community, thinking of the schools, thinking of the coaches and the kids that were, that kind of volunteered to be in this thing. But, far as, therapists and things of that sort, those things wasn't, we didn't even think of those things. I mean, you would think.
We could have used them.
Yeah, y'all could have used them, but I mean, we just thought like, hey, life happens, shit. Let's, like you get, hey, they didn't want you, like Luther Bedford said in the film, well, the reason why Arthur is not here because he's not playing like they thought he was gonna play. Money wouldn't have been a problem or none. Somebody would have made a phone call and he still would have been at the school. And I always say it would have been a different film had I stayed at St. Joe's. Totally different film because William needed me. William was about to lose his mind out there, especially after his knee injury. And then the conflicts of him going back and forth with Pingator. I just would have been that release for him, So I always say, it definitely would have been a different film, but.
Well, the thing that we didn't find out till the film was done, and this is what is one of the things that's interesting that I wish they had gotten into a little more, not about our film, but other films, which is William and Arthur knew each other. I mean, obviously they went to high school together for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But they knew each other before high school.
Yeah.
They used to go hang out at each other's houses on the weekend and not tell us. When we found that out, that was like, are you kidding me? They had a whole other relationship that's in the film. And so that's like one thing where, in a certain way, a subject, even when you were 13, 14, 15, you guys were very sharp about how to deal with us.
Yeah.
To say the least.
I mean, we had to be. I was a wise kid to be 14 and understand my world, what was going around me. But I also knew that I had something to give. And I didn't know my true value at that time, but I understood, different places, how Westchester, St. Joe's was, and how that school and that community out there was, and how where I was coming from, the city, how that was, and how people was at that time in my era. Hoop Dreams couldn't have been made if it wasn't for Emma Gates and Sheila Agee. You understand? We was 14 years old, so we had to get permission from our parents to even be in this film, to even be captured in real vulnerable ways. Black people know. I mean, we was, at that time, you're not letting no camera into the neighborhood or let alone your house to film whatever. We just wasn't like that. And so that's why we was like, I was telling Peter, John Singleton told the gangbangers in LA when he was filming Boys in the Hood, he always had a camera around, and he was telling them, like, yo, I'm gonna tell y'all a story one day. And this John Singleton telling the gangbangers in LA. And so I told them on the tweet, I was like, man, that was kind of how Hoop Dreams was. When the guys came around in the neighborhood, you couldn't get guys to play basketball or want to be on camera. They pulling their head down like, all right, man, AG done brought them cameras around. I'm finna leave the playground. They would just get little and get out the way. But after that first year, they was in our neighborhood for so long, all the gangbangers knew them. All the drug dealers knew Peter, Steve, Fred. So when they saw him pull up
with them,
when they saw him pull up in the what was the car you was driving?
The Maserati.
The Mazda. And they got all the equipment just jammed in the back, because they had a little hatchback and all of that. So they see them all getting out the car with their stuff. They was like, oh, that's Steve now. That's just the Cartemkin guys.
So, one of the things I want to talk about real quick, but we did have lots of issues that went on in that film, for instance, and maybe you can talk about this. But we at one point, we didn't know that Arthur had left St. Joe's.
Yeah.
We totally missed it. We just didn't know because, and then when we found out, we couldn't find him. We were looking for him, couldn't find him. We found
Right.
out that you were at the local high school, which was Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And things were not going well in the family,
Yeah.
too. So, and what we didn't realize was us trying to, we took it like, we were almost hurt.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't you come and tell us?
And tell us.
Whereas you were in a different
A
place.
different place, right?
I mean, so he was dealing with not wanting to let us down,
Mm-hmm.
but also he was picked out of a certain group of people to go play at this esteemed high school. Now he's back in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
because it was like failed.
Yeah.
Like failure.
It was almost like failure because I felt like the school didn't want me. Like they had, it was like playing favoritism with players. So when I went back to my high school in my neighborhood, everyone was, probably thought like, they didn't know why. They just could have made up a reason why they think I was there. But they, most likely it was like, oh, his mom them couldn't afford it, or he wasn't good enough. That's why he's back at Marshall. So at that time, my whole mentality was to prove everybody wrong, even my community, the people who I'm playing with, to let them know that, I'm not just back to do the same things as you guys doing. I'm here to do something big in life. And so that was my whole mentality and how I carried myself back at the school. And they accepted me with open arms and everything. But
we lost you for months.
yeah, you lost. Yeah, I mean, how they talk about mental health and all that now, like, I couldn't even think about mental health at that time. It was like, I got to get in school, and when no school let me in because St. Joe's let me out at the middle of the school year. So I had to sit out for September, October, November. Couldn't get back in school until that following January at Marshall. And that's when these guys showed back up. And I told them, I said,
we lost you between that time, sort of.
but I was like, I thought because I wasn't at St. Joe's, like I automatically wasn't gonna be in the project. And they was like, no, Steve damn near cried. He was like, oh no, Arthur, no.
We were dying because
Yep.
but I mean, the main thing is that I think, and you tell, but we were never thinking of filming because you guys were gonna make the NBA.
Right.
That wasn't it wasn't about basketball.
Yeah.
And basketball was a way in for us to look at something we were curious about.
Yeah.
And wanted to learn about. And I think what we were really upset about was this idea that you felt like we wouldn't be interested in you
Yep.
because you weren't at St. Joe's.
Yep.
And whereas it wasn't about St. Joe, about
Yep.
you, not about.
Absolutely.
And so once we got over that hurdle, then we hit a real hurdle, which was economic issues at your house.
Mm-hmm.
Again, lost Arthur for a while and went back, and this is an ethical question that you guys can see how you feel about or not. But went over, couldn't find him, phone was turned off.
Yep.
Finally we were outside at night and we saw a lamp walk across the house.
Mm-hmm.
And knocked. Finally, you let us in, and you were mad.
Yep.
And talk about what you didn't want us to film.
Yeah, I didn't
We
want
were
you
there.
guys. I didn't want you guys to film that day or at that time because I just didn't want my mom and my family to be seen in that light with our lights turned off. We was actually using our hallway extension cord lamp light. It was a light. It was an extension that we can plug into a hallway, and we had this big lamp that we used to carry all throughout the house. If we need a light in the kitchen, the bathroom, our bedroom, or anything. And so I just felt that would have been embarrassing for people to see. And to think about it, I was like, well, ain't nobody gonna never see this no way. Like it's a documentary. Like that's how I start like it started just like recurring to me like that. So I was mad, told them, I was like, no, I want y'all to film. But my mom came to them and was like, she calmed me down. She was like, man, it's okay. They can get what they want to get and film it. And as you see in the film, in that clip, I'm walking past, mad as I don't know what, like I don't think I don't think I spoke to them after that. Like I just gave them looks, like get out my house.
And again, one of the things, well, when we talked to your mom, what we asked was, could we get the shot? Because the truth is that the lights were out, the film was off. So we wanted to try to get that truth.
Yeah. And she explained it the best way she could. It wasn't nothing that she did. They set an appointment. The welfare people set an appointment for my mom, and she couldn't. I think it was they sent the letter, and she didn't get it, and so she missed an appointment, and so they cut her off like immediately. So she couldn't get her check to pay the bills or nothing. So that's what she told when she was laying on the bed with my little brother.
So that was, and so for us, then we went and we paid to have the lights turned on.
Paid to have the lights
We
turned
would have
on.
done it anyways. We told Sheila up front, his mom,
Yep.
that regardless, we're going to turn the lights on. This silly. I mean, we were not. This is the thing that I think it's really important when you're watching a film like Subject that they don't touch on, which is we're not journalists. We're storytellers.
Yep.
And because we're not journalists, we don't necessarily work under journalistic. So a journalist technically would never have gone and paid for the electric bill to come out.
No.
That just would not happen. They wouldn't do it. These were people that we had known for 3.5 years.
At that
close
point,
to 4 years.
close to 4.
At that point, why, how cold could you be or not? Documentary filmmakers, though, still to this day, there's arguments over taking action like that when you're making films about folks. And it's also very much a Western argument. So you very seldom will see a documentary filmmaker, when I'm working with American crews overseas or a network overseas, you'll very seldom see them ask somebody who's impoverished overseas in Africa, or I did a film in Cambodia, oh, we need a release from you. I mean, there is definite power to having money, camera, and we had some of that power too.
Yep.
But it is, what they were still talking about in that film is still a very Western-based,
Yeah.
And
I'm kind of glad that Jennifer Textera and Camilla Hall, both of them approached me. And William Gates supposed to have been in this too, but William had he was hospitalized at this time with a personal issue, and he couldn't participate in it. But I was kind of, when they told me about the project, I was like, you want to do a documentary on documentaries? I'm like, I don't know how that gonna work, but like, tell me, spill it to me. What's your, well, there's a whole ethnicity of it, the ethical issues, and how documentaries are, and who benefits from it and all. I'm like, well, my experience was kind of totally different because, first of all, before I was even thinking about trying to make it to the NBA, I had to survive my neighborhood just to live and get to see 18 years old and hopefully get a scholarship for somewhere. So I'm like, I'll participate.
And one last thing before we open it up for questions, which is the one thing too that I think is different because of the way that the filmmakers that I came up with, which was we never showed footage to them. Now think about this, for 7 years while we were making the film. We put highlight reels together for the kids, like a dunks and stuff like that in basketball games. But we did not want them to be so much of a participant where they actually were looking at themselves on camera and beginning to act differently than they would, even more differently than already having a camera in your face. And one thing that Kartemkin, the group that I'm with, in Chicago, that we've always done and it's part of our sort of film mantra, is before we lock a film, so almost finished, we show the film to the participants. And the participants are able to say, there are things that I have issues with. This isn't right. I want this out. Just like I said, I made my comment about something. So that's a really great thing to do. It's also one of the scariest things to do in your life, to like show your films to folks who it's their legacy, it's their story. You've gotten the great gift of being able to tell that story. Right. And so watching it with Arthur's family, there were a lot of things that we took out. Probably for the better, actually, and also the same with William's family. William's family wanted to watch the film alone. Yeah. And Arthur's family, we went over and we watched it, and there were two great things for me. One was your dad not recognizing that it was, because he was in a very different place at that time.
Yeah, kicked drugs and everything.
He was in a good place. and then the other one was, as soon as the Gates family came on, they just scanned through. They start talking, or they put the VCR on and go, which was pretty great. So, questions, anyone? Just because we could go on forever, but I think question, yeah.
So my question is, as filmmakers, I think we're around people in the industry and have an understanding of once you get out of post and you put your film out there, that you're gonna have interviews and you're gonna interview with people on media or have some kind of attention drawn to you. But as a filmmaker, you're expecting that in the preference. As a subject, however, I feel like there's a difference because you're putting this person into a celebrity role that isn't prepared for. So and now it feels like some films are more celebrity, documentary driven, and then others is another baseline story of a nobody, of their story, whatever that is. So, were you prepared at all? I know you couldn't do it up until a certain point, but even protocol coming in, were you prepared at all by the filmmakers? And do you think, as filmmakers, we should prepare our subjects better for possibility of more attention that they're just not prepped for?
Yeah, I think you can look at that both ways. Me personally, like I said, I was very aware of my surroundings, and I was a quick thinker and a quick judge of character. It was like not winging it, but I knew how to answer questions. Whoever asked me a question, whether it was Brokaw, whether it was, speaking with whoever, Magic Johnson, Quincy Jones, whoever those people was. And I kind of hate the celebrity fame part of it, because I didn't never care about the fame or the celebrity. I wanted to make the damn NBA, period. And I was like, if let me get to the NBA and let my fame and everything come off of that, But when the film happened, it was just like, this is the best stuff in the world, because I was just being myself. I didn't have to turn on no other person and none of that. I was just being real, true, authentic Arthur Agee Jr., the son of Arthur Sr. and Sheila Agee. So when I was in college talking, speaking with Tom Brokaw, very eloquently, I must say. Yes, sir, no, sir, And sometimes he would be like, oh, Arthur, you don't have to be that formal and everything. Just call me Mr. Brokaw. I just did, Mr. Brokaw. He would just have a little laugh or whatever. And so he was able to sense my personality and everything, and it was great. But to your question, I think for someone who's not trained and who's not aware of, what celebrity and fame could do to them and all of that, I think they definitely need to be prepped for that.
I mean, you could see how tortured those folks were in the film, who were having to relive things that they did not want to relive over and over again. That's pretty torturous. Yeah.
Arthur, did you have to explain to your friends what was going on all the time when the camera was following you around? And did it
Well, my friends, I always kind of joke with them anyway. I was, letting them know like, oh man, yo, the camera's gonna be around today. You better, your haircut is messed up and stuff like that. I used to tease them, like that. But sometimes I used to forget that the camera was even around. So that made it even more easier for me. I'm in a class clowning, eating cotton candy, throwing it at girls and stuff. So it kind of like, I knew it was there, but I didn't want to like put on an act or a front, like, not being, who I was, true to my core. And this was a teenage kid in high school that loved basketball, loved his teammates, liked it the girls, didn't like school that much, but it was like, this is something that I have to do for me to stay on the team, for me to get a scholarship, a college scholarship and everything. So I was one of those kids that thought, well, I'm gonna just do it just enough to get by. I'm gonna get all C's this semester, And then my mom had to come up to the school and put a stop to that, so.
We told your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, this obviously is a film that's advocating for more ethical practices when making documentaries. I was wondering what both of your experiences was being involved in this documentary, whether they kind of practice what they preach in this production.
They did. They approached me right off the bat and was like, we want to offer you a co-producer credit if you do sign on to be a participant in this film. And I was like, wow, well that's never happened before. It's got to be the first. And so, they were practicing what they preached by, pitching me that and telling me that. So at this point, and they check in with me all the time, just to see how I'm doing, ask about my family, my son Devin, he's 15 now. If he would see that, how little he was and how squeaky his voice was, he's 15 now, lifting weights, playing football and basketball, so he would really be like kind of, oh man, I don't want nobody to see me like that, because he supposed to liking girls now, whatever, he'll be embarrassed. For them to see him that little and everything. Like, oh, you're so cute.
Well, and they let us see the film.
And they did.
So there were a couple little things we changed, but not just sequencing of what happened before or not. So
and I think they had therapy on the film, pretty much for those people who was in those films. It was almost. I was looking at it when I first saw it. I was like, damn, this shit is really sad. I'm glad our film was in this to like kind of, to show the era of the start of the documentary, boom. And I was so glad to be on it to where I wasn't speaking bitter about our time, our relationship, and what Steve and Kartemko and what they meant to our family. And, as you sit back now and you think about it, you say, man, well, I really probably shouldn't have signed that contract to make that film because of what you know now. But at that time, you wasn't thinking about none of that. You was just thinking about changing your family's life. What can I do to help my mom? What can I do to help my dad get off drugs? And Hoop Dreams helped my family get back our core of being a family. Dad got off drugs, he started going to church, became a pastor, a minister. My mom didn't have to work anymore. I didn't even have to make the NBA to even buy her a house. So Hoop Dreams brought us so full circle, when I did buy my mom's the house, we all stayed in the house together, everybody. By this time, my older sister, she had her own life, but it was just me, my mom, my dad, and my little brother. And, it was this suburban house in Bourbon. My dad would wake up every morning in his robe and walk out on his back deck and cut the grass. And it was just like the life that he longed it for, by his son being seen by these guys and being in the right place at the right time, because they could have picked anybody else out on that court. You know what I'm saying? It could have been any kid. But they chose me, a kid with a dream and a kid with a will that said, I saw Isaiah Thomas do this, I'm doing the same thing. And I ain't finna let no drug dealer, no gang banging, none of my friends try to derail me from that. And so it was like, when I was able to sign my college scholarship to a junior college, it was like, oh, I made it. I just gotta live long enough in the city to get to college so I can get out of this city. So when that happened, my mom was crying when she walked off and everything. She seeing her son, who she done raised, and ain't never left the house before that period of time. And I told her, I said, Mom, you ain't gonna never have to pay for no college for me, because I'm gonna get a basketball scholarship. And I did that. So it was like, I did make it. I made it in life. See that real passion? I ain't even used the mic for that.
Anybody else? Yeah.
I mean, I guess like from where the documentaries are now, to what extent, like given informed consent, given everything that you could possibly know about the way subjects like might get out, given the release of the film, to what extent is the subjects kind of accountable to what happens to them after a film is released, and versus the filmmaker?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I know from our standpoint, like you said, I mean, I can't really speak to the other participants or the other subjects in the film, but I know for us, we always had a connection. Like there was a family bond that we still had even after I went to college. I mean, these guys still would call my mom and dad and them to check in on me to see how I was doing at school. It wasn't just, oh, the film came out, now you guys go your way and we go our way, and we'll never see you again. I mean, they constantly came over. Steve's wife always made Christmas cookies for us and everything. Still send
I'm
to this
Jewish,
day.
I couldn't do it.
Still, right? Still send cookies to us to this day, and I think that was the true testament in our life, in our film, that how subjects and the directors can kind of meet in the middle and still be there for each other.
But I think, I think it's much harder to make a documentary film today and to deal with all the issues that you see in a film like that. And also the fact that, Andy Warhol always said everybody has their 15 minutes. Like everybody really does now have their 15 minutes, and it's televised or can be, people are so used to cameras. Again, you have to think back of the technology world where no iPhones, nothing, people, no TikTok, where people film themselves endlessly. Where you could go overseas and take a Polaroid picture of a family and make their year because they actually could see themselves. Yeah. And it's such a different world out there right now. And it's corporatized to the point of, so one of the first things I pitch all the time to all the big streamers, one of the first things they ask me is, in your budget, are you going to pay people? One of the first things, every time. And I'll say no, even though I know that there's a way that, in terms of paying, there's so many different ways, as they said, like story rights, whatever, that you could do it. And I also think, like they also say in the film that's really important is, I do think there are fundamentally two kinds of filmmakers. And I think they're the filmmakers who parachute in, they do what they need to do with their subjects for 3-4 weeks, and then they leave. And yeah, I'm not saying if the film gets released and it does okay, they don't hang with them a little or become involved. Then there is that other side where, let's just say I'm really lucky that I have an extended family. And everything from Arthur to a 72-year-old preacher to I mean, it's a very large extended family of people that I've made films with. And that partly comes from the group of filmmakers who trained me, and not partly, totally. You know, we came up, not me, but I'm saying my filmmakers that taught me came in from the 60s with a very collective view, doing union films, all different kinds of things, where it really was about community and about what you could do to help community, and it was community activism. Not necessarily hammering it over your head, but just telling people stories that hadn't been heard before.
Yeah.
Kind of simple in a weird way. And I think there are those two types of filmmakers. Corporate side, if I had tried to tell his story and William's story in a year, or just their family story in a year, like pick any year, 15, 16, 17, whatever, I think that film would have been an exploitative film.
Yep.
Because it would have not given time to develop character and to see Arthur, William, and all the people. Also, it wouldn't have shown the things that St. Joe's did that was wrong, or other systematic issues that we have to deal with as filmmakers if you just jump in. Now with filmmakers with subjects, you're making a deal with the subject to be in a film. They know it's going to be over in 6 months at most, because if HBO gives you money to make a film today, or Netflix or whatever, they don't want money sitting out there for 5 years. They want money to be turned around, like, we need this next April. And that's why you see all of these templated documentaries now. Talking heads, archival footage, talking heads, archival footage. Maybe a scene here and there thrown in. And that's a shame, because we have the ability now with technology where it's so inexpensive to actually go and gather footage. I'm not saying to make a film, but to gather footage. It's inexpensive, that, you know, that we're forced into that world, even to the point where we get sent templates of how we're supposed to shoot it, what lights to use, how it's supposed to look, because it has to look like their brand. And those are real issues with documentary, and it's sort of a silly ethical thing. For years, this is horrible to say, but we complained about PBS. We were always so pissed at PBS. Because PBS, we would put our films on PBS, and I was like the young age group. You know, in other words, the age group for PBS is 55 to 70, who watches documentaries. And we're trying to get to a younger audience. And they don't know how to, they still don't know how to. But right now, they're the most ethical place to put a film. And you're going to see more diversity in the films that they have, because they won't just be true crime. They won't just be deviant behavior. They might actually be things that are from around the world. And I can't believe I'm saying this, because I fought very hard, you know, and I still do, to try to get PBS to what's the word? Be younger. But right now, in terms of, do I want a bunch of Netflix executives writing notes to me about how they feel a cut is, or do I want to be able to send a finished cut to PBS and have them play it? So it's a rough, it's an interesting time. I think it will shift, like all of these things. It already shifted from when that film was made. It's totally different now than when they made it, because it is not it's what Tom Powers said, which is it's the corporatization of documentary now. That's even much further pushed along. And the budgets, therefore, increase. So
You just think about it.
if you just think, just real quick, but I mean, if you think about, we made the first 2 years of Hoop Dreams, we had $5,000 in I-own camera equipment. The total cost of the film, without us, because we didn't get paid until afterwards, it was like $350,000. And we filmed for a bazillion years. We obviously had to have different jobs and did all different stuff. But right now, a normal hour on Netflix is $2 to $3 million for a show. And part of that is not filmmakers getting paid, it's executives getting paid. It's having 25 people above the line or executive producers who come on. Everybody wants a piece of it now because they look at it as a commodity,
Yep.
not so much as storytelling.
And storytelling.
So
And so it's two
there's my
things.
bad rap about it. But
It's two things that I like that Hoop Dreams did historically. Hoop Dreams changed the way the Oscars have to vote on all films. Hoop Dreams was that film that told the Oscars, hey, y'all need to go and rechange this or we gonna make a big fuss about it. The Oscars had to go in and rechange it. They was like, we can't do this. I mean, can you imagine? Hoop Dreams was up for Best Picture with Forrest Gump and Goodfellas. A documentary that these guys didn't even know what they were doing.
thanks a lot.
I mean, they didn't know what they were doing. We didn't know. We did not know this was going to be seen by millions in the world. So when that did happen, and I'm in my dorm room. I'll never forget. I'm in my dorm room at Arkansas State, and so this is the time the Oscars, the Final Four, all this at the same time. I see them in tuxedos. They up here I think they had an Oscar for best editing. They all got on tuxedos. Like
lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the David Letterman thing. Yeah. The David Letterman thing.
Don't go on YouTube. Yeah, but I mean, I do think it's it's really difficult now to, as I said, you really have to be upfront with the subjects that you're making your film with. Do it, really be honest and really walk through what the process is. And by having to do that, you may lose something, some of the spontaneity and all of the things that we were able to get, or in some of the other films that I've worked on have been able to get, because, it's a complicated issue now, and it's complicated too by, as you know, whose story it is to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Is Sonia Childress, who I love and respect, is like, maybe we have to re-examine what we did.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I think it's a really interesting time ethically in documentary, and it's going to keep getting that way, and the discussion's going to keep going. The one thing we have to be careful about that it's not just a discussion, but that it's real change, and that real change is economic change, where filmmakers start to have some power, and economic power of people of color and everything else.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like, yeah, there'll be change, but it's still the same people making the money, and the same people hiring, and the same people. It looks good, but it isn't really true.
No.
So we just have to be on top of that for all of you guys too.
And the other thing about it is that I loved about what Hoop Dreams did, there's an educational curriculum that's built to the movie. I actually go out and surprise students, different organizations. They'll watch the movie. They don't know that I'm coming to surprise them, but I'm coming with all the issues that was raised in the film. And it's in the curriculum booklet and everything. Dr. Richard Lapchak from University of Central Florida, they put this curriculum together from the film, and that's what I use right now as I go out doing my speaking appearances, motivational speaking and like that, because I know that I'm not the only kid, it's coming up on 30 years, I know that I'm not the only kid that's lived the way that I was living, that their mom is not, the same way as my mom. My dad, they got a dad that's on drugs, maybe an uncle. So by me being that visual piece to the film that's still living and kicking and trying to motivate these kids to think differently about their lives at that high school age, because if you really think about it, high school is the culmination of who you're going to be in the next, when you get to 25, 26. that high school, those high school years is what's gonna mold you into thinking of just what the world is and where do you see yourself fitting in it. And that's why I'm so happy that my son right now, he's a freshman in high school at Notre Dame. He goes to a Catholic high school, but he is having a ball right now. He is not having to go through none of the stuff that I went through. And that's so refreshing to see him come home from practice, eating, talking about his day. This boy gets up at 6:30 on his own and out the door. I don't have to wake him up. His mom don't have to wake him up or nothing. And he is having a blast. And I'm just like, man, I would love to see all kids like this to have a great high school career, no matter if they playing sports or whatever. But they know they learning to become and know who they are. So when they leave high school, they know what they want to do, immediately. Do I want to go get a job, or do I want to go right into the workforce, or do I want to be an entrepreneur? So I'm glad the educational curriculum is still alive and kicking well.
And one last thing, I know we've been on for a while, but one thing that it's sad that William isn't able to be here or
Yeah.
to participate. Because William had a very different experience, I think,
Yeah.
than you did.
Yeah.
William, after a while, he left Chicago. And I think part of the reason he left Chicago was
The violence.
But also hoop dreams.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
He felt in some ways, I don't know, not targeted, but people knew him too well. He was having problems with his kids in high school.
Yeah, Will is more private than I
Yeah.
am. He's if you see him out eating or whatever, he wouldn't want you to come up to him and say, "Hey, I recognize you from Hoop Dream." He'll be like, "Okay, don't you see me eating?" He just have a different relationship with the film and the fame and how he viewed himself. Because some of the for a long period of time early on, he didn't even let his kids see the film as they got older.
It wasn't until they were late in high
Yeah,
school.
late in high school and he only showed them the first part, like the first freshman and sophomore seasons. But he because he was viewed as a prodigy basketball player at 14 years old. I mean, you got to understand, this guy was dunking at 14 years old and going into a powerhouse high school, taking someone's position and starting on varsity.
Which was really
which
in
was
that day.
Which was really, really like just only probably one or two people could do that. And he was one of them. And so he felt like that after the knee injury, he didn't win. He didn't go down state. He felt like a failure. Like his whole basketball career was a failure, and that's how people was gonna look at him out in the world.
And the other thing with William is that I only lived 5 blocks from him, 6 blocks from him. 2 different worlds. You cross one street from my neighborhood to his neighborhood, 2 totally different worlds. And William, what's interesting about his mom, and I think this is part of where William has his, and again, we're extremely tight. It's all good. But he had a different experience, like everybody does. And William's mom let us film, but would not let us talk to her for 2 years. And finally, we were able to we could film a scene with her, but we couldn't ever do a sit-down interview.
Right.
If she was there, fine, but if we asked her a question, she just wouldn't answer it. Like if we were, if she was cooking or whatever, and we just wanted to talk to her. And then once we finally sat her down, it took her 2 years to trust us. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, and this is also, I think, really interesting, one of the reasons why it's harder to make a documentary film these days, because it's this, what I'm gonna tell you, times of 100, was she lived in Cabrini Green. She was which was a housing project in Chicago. She was one of the first residents of it.
Yep.
She loved it. It was her neighborhood. It may be violent.
She didn't want to leave. Yeah.
She would not leave. She loved that neighborhood. And there was a murder in her neighborhood, and the local news came in and did an interview with her. And she did the interview, and it made, when it aired on television, it made her seem like she did not like her neighborhood.
Yeah.
So she didn't trust anyone with the camera. She didn't want anyone to tell her story. I mean, she was, when you're talking about appropriating stories and things like that,
Right. And who gets to tell them?
yeah, her story was appropriated in 30 seconds, you know, on a news show,
Yeah.
and then just never really trusted anybody with any kind of media. And then she had two sons, because William's brother was also a prodigy, who were in the news all the time. So it was sort of like her weird nightmare
Yep.
in some ways.
Coming,
You know,
yeah.
like where constantly, everywhere she went, you know, she had to deal because they were both, you know, prodigy ball players. And, but it took a really long time to have Emma trust us and, you know, form a bond. you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, but
And
William's
partly
great.
because, so if you think about how many people now with social media, like how many kids, you know, are put on social media in ways they don't want to be seen, all that kind of, and
Yep.
adults and all that. Again, it's one more hurdle for documentary filmmakers to get over.
No. And just to give you an update on William, William is still married to Catherine.
Which is amazing.
They've been married, I think, almost 27, 28 years.
They were married when I got married.
Oh, yeah.
34 years,
Yeah,
35.
yeah, they in 34 years. The two oldest boys, both of them graduated, and both of them are married now from Houston Baptist University. The youngest one, Marquise, he goes to Houston Baptist University right now. He redshirted last year, and now he's playing. And William and I do a Hoop Dreams podcast together right now, and you can find that on all platforms. And we're also, he and I are going to do a thorough update of what happened to Hoop Dreams in the last, you know, what to us personally, you will be hearing it from our mouths, and we're going to executive produce it.